Hi everyone, and welcome to what's going to be sort of a podcast edition. Thought we'd try out a different format. Today I have a special guest on, BBC correspondent Sean Dilley. And before we get into that though, I just wanted to say how impressed and pleased I am that we've managed to get to 1,000 subscribers. It's actually, I think now 107 subscribers. Not that I check it every couple of hours or anything. That would be awkward and embarrassing. But I've got Sean on today. He's going to hopefully have a chat with us about his work for the BBC. And I think we're going to bring up guide dogs and basically just have a chat about different things that come up as being blind. So he's on the side here. So we should bring him in now. Hello, Sean.
Hello. My goodness, isn't that some kind of CB radio term on the side?
It is, yes, actually.
Not that I've ever been massively into it, but I might have touched one over the years. And I'm sitting here. Let me give a visual description for anyone who can't see. I'm very muscular. I look just like Brad Pitt, and I'm a compulsive liar. I'm not actually. All of those things are untrue. I'm not a compulsive liar. I'm certainly not like Brad Pitt. I'm quite thin on top, let's be honest with you. Fairly sort of average-ish size, if I'm being generous to myself. And I'm sitting here at a wooden table, got a cup of coffee in one hand and a diet soda, would we say, for those of us who've been in America. And behind me, there is a picture of the Washington Monument taken in front of the Lincoln Memorial. That I actually took that photo with a sighted colleague who took a walk down with me. So there's the visual description. And I'm sure, Dave, you'll probably do the same, right?
Yep. I actually didn't think of doing that, so I'll Sean is the actual professional. We were supposed to start this at 9 o'clock. I'm not sure what time it is now, but he was ready to go.
Whatever time you're watching is what the time is. Times are relevant on YouTube, dear, you know.
He was ready at 9 o'clock, and I was at least 15 minutes late to get going, and I got here into the office 2 hours early. So just, I'm definitely a member of Simon Whistler's team when it comes to organisation. But yeah. This is the first time I'm shooting from my new office, which is an old abandoned bank vault somewhere in the south coast of England. If I were to turn the camera around, which I won't, you would see just exactly how much of a state the rest of the room is in. But I'm sitting at an L-shaped desk with a MacBook in front of me. Just behind me is a lamp that's got shelves on it, so it's like a unit/lamp situation. And just off to my left, which I don't think is in shot, but it is there, is a unit with a coffee maker and a few other bits and pieces.
Fabulous. Now that sounds exciting. Yours sounds somehow more illicit and exciting. Well,
I got offered the space, and for the Brain Blaze viewers, really, I took it because of the ongoing joke that Simon keeps all his writers locked in a basement, and now I'm actually working in a basement.
Right, so that's one of the ways we actually first met, isn't it? Because just for people who might not know your YouTube channel, you do an awful lot of writing with Simon Whistler. I've been a massive fan of quite a lot of his series of YouTube videos. He does quite a lot of them, actually. And I'm speaking personally there, not for my employer. And then it was when we were speaking, and I said, I really enjoyed a particular, I think it was a Brain Blaze. And you said, well, I wrote that. No wonder, it was flipping brilliant, you said.
I think actually I first reached out to you for a Brain Blaze idea, which we are going to do it, actually. I got clearance to do it the other day. But there's a bit of a backlog at the moment. It was your story of somebody trying to steal your phone. I don't know if you want to tell that whilst we're here.
I can do that. I can hold that phone up because some of the kit we're using, this is a bit geeky, but some people watching or listening, before anybody picks me up on that one, I can't see a thing. I would still say watching. So I'm sitting here with a mixing desk, fairly decent camera, but we're connected on a FaceTime call. I'm letting the lighting on the magic now, but I'm holding up towards the camera the very phone. It's scratched on the back, and I remember I'd bought it fairly recently. I'd bought it maybe like the November of 2023, and at that point, 2022, sorry, I'm a year behind myself. At that point anyway, I'm walking up the street 5:50 in the morning in central London in a place called, it's actually Bolsover Street near Great Portland Street, with a white stick, and I was between guide dogs, and I was using it to send a voice message to a friend of mine who's an orientation and a mobility specialist, or a ROVI as they call them, rehabilitation officer for visual impairment, in case you're wondering, because I didn't know what that stood for either. And I was spooked out by somebody coming quite close to me on a bike a couple of times. And in central London, people do weird things, right? But I was sort of tuned up to that situation. And I'm in a street called Bolsover Street, which is just off of Euston Road and Great Portland Street. Somebody comes up to me in a very narrow space, and they're trying to do a pincer movement with my phone, but I'm holding onto it quite tight. It said, "I'm going to kill you." And this is all a bit surreal, to be honest with you. I mean, I hope not to upset people to that degree ordinarily, so it's not a daily thing, people saying, "I'm going to kill you." The gentleman, see, look at my manners, I'm still being polite about it, did actually manage to get hold of my phone. And it was just a bit surreal, like, what the heck? And he was on a bike, as it turns out. And because of, it's hard to describe, but I was against a wall on the left, and it was a very narrow area with cars on the right. And I think, oh, well, what do you do? And I reached out with my left hand. I turned around very quickly, reached out with my left hand and missed him. And I thought, well, that's gone. And just for a second, I think he's on a really noisy bike. He might as well have a klaxon saying, "I'm a robber, I'm a robber." So I turned round to that position. I heard his wheel go off the pavement. I was there with a white stick without a dog at the time, which is possibly why I was quite so reckless about my own safety, if I'm being frank about it. So I'm there with a white stick. I'm chasing him. I'm thinking back to, things I might have been shown to do a very long time ago for very boring reasons. And I'm sort of with a white cane, long cane. I'm running. I'm thinking, I'm chasing him to detain him and get my phone back. It was that quick. I actually knew in my head, okay, what I'm intending to do is to arrest this guy for robbery if I can get him, but also get my phone back. That sounds crazy. I'm not a copper, by the way. But nevertheless, in that scenario, anybody can make an arrest because, he's just nicked your phone, threatened to kill you. And it's not really practical for a police officer to make that arrest. So in England and Wales, that's perfectly lawful. I didn't think I'd necessarily catch him, but I thought I'm going to do something that's either going to be spectacular or, well, not just painful, but make me look ridiculous. And I dived. I ran as fast as I could. I discarded my cane to the right-hand side. I threw it, and I dived forward like Superman, only I'm a bit bigger than Superman. I can't fly. I mean, I was wearing my underwear inside, unlike Superman, who seems to, like to do the other thing. And as I connected with the chap, it was kind of his back, and I moved my arms around his shoulders. By the way, this isn't standard BBC training, can I point out? And with all the weight I could, because all of my body was off the floor, I pushed down on him, not on his neck, nowhere near his neck, got to the floor, winded him. I didn't realise at the time I'd actually cut my shins and bruised myself and all sorts of things, cracked my elbow, all that fun stuff. And I said, "Give me my phone back." I put my hand out and he did. Clearly winded. But then I said, standing up, because I was quite annoyed. I mean, most people, they say, "Well, why don't you punch him or, why don't you swear at him?" Because it's not me. So I just said in a very firm voice, while standing up, I put the phone in my pocket. I said, stay still, you're under arrest for robbery. And then I explained the nuance to him in a moment. But I'm getting down because I'm thinking, okay, having done this, if anybody's interested, I knew that I was using Section 3 of the Criminal Law Act 1967. That's how geeky I am. And I'm doing that. It's not self-defense because he's made off from me. It's not necessarily to protect anybody else, although I'm sure it did. But at that point, you could say it's prevention of crime, but the crime's already been committed, so it's the robbery. So my legal power in that sense is I'm using reasonable force to effect an arrest. So that's what I did. I told him he was under arrest for robbery, got down to the floor. You've then got something called known risks and unknown risks. The known risks are kicking, punching, biting, spitting, headbutting, that sort of thing. And the unknown risks are weapons. And this is... believe it or not, all of this is going through my head at the time, Dave. And it was all quite surreal. I've got down. I lean my left leg on his legs. There's an awful lot of reporting on this. Not a lot of it's very right. And I grab hold of, I'm looking for a bit of the wrist. It's called the ulnar vein, I believe, but it's the knobbly bits between your wrists. If you've ever had handcuffs on, I have, but never because I've been in trouble or anything, but just in as much
Just in the bedroom.
Just in the, no. I'd never keep them upstairs, Dave, you know that. But she's obviously in the past, just because I've had the opportunity to see how some of this stuff is done. So I was looking for that part of the wrist, because if you can control that, because someone can't really do anything with their hands. I'm trying to mitigate the risks, because there's nobody about. I found that knobbly bit on his left hand, which is on my right side. And as I'm trying to go for his left arm, I can't find it. Got to bear in mind I can't see, right? So I've managed to get hold of what was a puffer jacket. I'm not sure if this is too much detail, but I've got hold of a puffer jacket, and eventually I get down to his wrist, and he's going for his pocket, in his right pocket. And I could feel something. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm not in any doubt about it. It was a knife. Police later said, yeah, it probably was, but they do also carry acid. So, potentially it's quite perilous. But once I've got him under control, I very calmly say to him, stay very still. I said, if you go near that pocket, because bear in mind he was going for his right pocket, I said, if you go near that pocket, I'm going to punch you as hard as I can, okay? He said, yes, boss. I said, right. I said, I'm not a policeman, but as I've told you, you are under arrest for robbery. You've just stolen my phone from me.
He probably thought he was the most unlucky criminal in the world, and he jumped
undercover
an undercover
policeman.
police officer.
Yeah, I've been accused of that. I've been accused of being a policeman more times than I can care to remember, and which has always puzzled me. But I have got hold of him. We're there like 4 or 5 minutes, and I'm saying, hey, and I don't want to say the S word in case, but the one that it rhymes with, I don't know, Piri. And I'm saying, call the emergency service number. The irony of this, Dave, and I was wearing my watch at the time, so I don't really understand why. The irony, it says you'll need to unlock your phone first. Now it's interested in my security. So I'm in a position, I've got a man detained on the floor for robbery, which is insane for a blind BBC journalist to be doing. But he is lawfully in custody. He's in my custody. He's under arrest. There's no ego in thinking that for me, by the way. I wish this never happened, but by the same token, that is the situation. People say, I don't understand what reasonable force is. I think the law's really clear on that. If you like, we can come back to that later. But I'm calling out for anyone's help, because ideally, if you see that, dial 39s. I mean, ideally, if you've seen a robbery, say I've seen a robbery and the person's detained, but like, even if you say there are two people fighting in the street, can you get here urgently? That will work. So I'm 5:55 in the morning at this point. He's been there for a few minutes, and he makes a really good attempt to get up and to escape from me. And so I get hold. He's wearing a rucksack. It was probably full of stolen phones, to be honest. I yank that down to the floor pretty hard, and it does wind him. I've not punched him. By the way, I'd never punched the gentleman. He's not a gentleman, obviously. Never punched him because I didn't think I needed to. It would have been quite reasonable to do so, by the way, I would suggest legally in that circumstance. But the way that I was restraining him, I didn't feel that I needed to. But then bizarrely, although he's just threatened to kill me and rob me, my concern is not only for detaining him, but then like his care is my responsibility. And I don't want someone to end up really badly injured over a flipping phone. But by the same token, picking on a vulnerable blind person was fairly horrendous. I bet he doesn't tell the story down at work, down at the pub. Work is nicking phones, right? So I dragged his arms away from the floor so he's not on his chest. Fair dues. It was a brilliant attempt to get away. His rucksack's come off during this, and I've got him detained still. And here's what was going through my head. I had been working a night shift, and I'll be honest with you, I never love it. We do 3 of them normally. We'd do 3 of them in a month is what we're supposed to do roughly. And I was going for the walk, try and get a coffee. It was between Christmas and New Year, 27th of December. I thought I might get a coffee from like a certain coffee shop, but it wasn't open. And when I had him there on the floor, there's nothing that really emulates in words the reality of feeling the cold, hard tarmac against your knees that you don't actually realise are bleeding and everything at that point. In the cold with a robber, really bad guy. He was a bad guy. And nobody's helping. And here's what went through my head. I thought, in a minute, because these people work in gangs, his mate's going to come around the corner, stick a knife in me, and because there's nobody there, I'm going to bleed out. And then I thought, and I let me tell you, I'm somebody who's never had any suicidal ideation in my life. My goodness, I love it too much. I intend to live forever or to die trying, as Joseph Heller once said in Catch-22 or Closing Time, the sequel. But in any case, I have a lust for life. I love it. But at the time, I thought, he's taking my phone. If that happens, I don't care. But then I thought, well, hang on a minute. And it really was. I was having this conversation with myself. If I get stabbed, bleed out, he gets away, and he get my phone as well back out of my pocket, probably, let's be honest. I wouldn't finish the last 2 hours of editing on a film I was working with my mate Rob Taylor, who now works for CBS London Bureau, but he was BBC camera shoot edit at the time. And I really thought, because it was a film we were making about guide dogs at the time, and we were following a puppy raiser from finishing up with her first dog and having her second dog while we were following the journey of her passing her dog over. That's Lisa Allison and Archie. We also featured Kelly Nazir, who's a barrister who recently also just trained with a guide dog. And to a degree, without wishing to sound dramatic about it, even though this will probably be the beginning to your YouTube trailer, who knows? I think possibly the film I made about guide dogs that had that positive impact, I think it was the thought of that not going to air that possibly saved my life that day.
It's amazing what goes through your head in certain situations. The only thing that's happened to me that's comparable was I was at a party years ago. I think I was probably about 19, and at that time I had a big black Belgian Shepherd called Sabre, and he was a street rescue. And so I was at this party, and I went out through the back of the house and out the back gate just to let the dog go for a wee. And I walked round the corner into this alleyway, and somebody grabbed me, and I'm trying not to put my hands up because my my camera's got all sorts of hand gestures on it. So if you do stuff with your hands, it
it might do like a close-up zoom up your left nostril or something.
So he's grabbed me by the throat and pushed me against the wall. But the dog was on an extendable lead. And so the dog hadn't come around the corner yet. He pushed me against the wall, and he said, empty your pockets. And I was like, no.
Yeah.
And I just flicked my hand on the lead, and the dog came around the corner. And he's seen this guy. He didn't bark, he didn't growl. He just jumped up, grabbed the guy by the hand and the wrist and pulled it down. And when you're cooking and you get a bunch of spaghetti and you break it, before you put it, dry spaghetti, you break it to put it in the water. That's
culinary criminal damage, by the way, but we're going to come back to that afterwards. Tell your story. I don't want to interrupt your story with teaching how to cook.
You're of the non-breaking spaghetti rules. Eh? But that was the sound this guy's hand made. And, well, if the dog hadn't been there, I probably would have emptied my pockets, but didn't need to after that. He seemed very, very uninterested as to what I had in my pockets, and more interested about having his hand seen by a medical professional.
Do you think at the time, I mean, again, I don't want to go into your personal details that you're not happy to. This was a point at your life where you were blind, and do you think it was obvious to that individual that you were blind? Did they target you because of your vision impairment, do you think?
I don't think so, because I didn't have a stick with me. I didn't always. I do now, much more now. But if I knew the area and I was only going a short distance, I didn't always use a stick. So
that's insanity, by the way. Sorry, but it is.
When I was a kid, I'll come back to that. But Yeah, so I think he was just waiting in the alley and chanced his arm the first person who came around the corner, and unfortunately, the first person who came around the corner had an exceptionally loyal Belgian Shepherd on the end of the extendable lead.
Don't rob blind people, kids. I think that's the solution. Right, question in, Dave, here from Gordon Ramsay. No, not that one. It's not a real question. I'm just going to come back to the spaghetti thing. I was trying to string it from one to the other, if you see what I mean. No, you need a pair of tongs, boiling water, and you dip your spaghetti into the water, and you have to twist it around. That's what you got to do.
My wife's a fully trained chef, so.
And what does she do? Does she encourage this vandalism on your part?
Well, she would put the spaghetti in whole, but.
But you're a bit of a cook, I've heard.
Well, kind of. I've got a few cooking videos on the channel. That's kind of how I started doing the channel in the first place. Was I wanted to do cooking so easy that a blind guy can do it, you know. And I started doing that when I lived up north.
Right.
And we had the smallest kitchen. It was like the kitchen you would have in a caravan. It was better quality than that, but that sort of size.
Sure.
So I did a couple of videos up there. They're still on the channel. In fact, I think the potato skins video is the most watched video on the channel, but it has been up for 5 years. And but yeah, that was back. I mean, we shot that on my iPhone 6, I think.
Good memory. But I love the fact that everybody is a content creator now, because once upon a time, if you do my job, you'd be a TV correspondent and pretty much might do a bit of radio once upon a time. And then that's changed over the years to doing everything. And actually, our priority now, I mean, I think this is a media thing generally, is making sure that we're serving. I've just head-butted my microphone, if anybody heard anything there. Nose-butted it, to be frank. It really is these digital platforms, but I love the fact that everybody is a content creator, which is fabulous. So
you used to have skills, and now I can do it.
You know what? I don't know that that's even true. I mean, you do have to have skills, but I don't think. I mean, this, it's my opinion, but it's not a controversial one. It's not a matter of political or industrial controversy. I think you have to have skills to have a successful YouTube channel, and I spend a lot of time. Jack Mate's Happy Hour is one I watch an awful lot of. I was watching the one with Peter Blexley, the fella from Hunted, the ex-Met detective constable, fairly recently. And I think you need probably a different set of skills, but you also need a very similar set of skills. So there's that aspect. What I do think is potentially sort of undervalued sometimes. This is why trust is really important to what we do as journalists. Is there are things you do report on, like legal things, and let's just say I've caught some YouTubers online and they're talking about ongoing legal cases, and you're thinking, oh, that's a contempt of court, or oh, you could get sued for saying that. So I do think, in terms of the craft that is journalism, and it's not a protected term, by the way. Anybody can call themselves a journalist, and many people do it. I am so proud to be a BBC journalist, and I'm sure many, are, be that Sky News, ITN, or Channel 4 or whatever, because it kind of speaks to that idea. Particularly, I would suggest that BBC trust is kind of at the heart of what we do. We do it without favour and affection, and I would say, right, okay, here's the key difference, Dave. This is I'm formulating as I speak, but I think for me the most important thing is being absolutely accurate, correct, and factual. And there's a degree of a performance when you're telling a story, because you have to do storytelling techniques, but it's secondary. Whereas if you're doing a YouTube channel, you want to, I don't know, get down with the kids, as it were. It's just a different approach to storytelling, but I think it's broadly the same thing. It's engaging your audience.
Yeah. I like a phrase that James Comey uses a lot for Sean will know who he is, but if anybody out there who doesn't, he used to be the head of the FBI. He referred to then the FBI as a reservoir of trust, and everybody who joins can either add to or take away from that reservoir, and adding a few drops to the reservoir is what you're supposed to do, but it only takes a few actions to completely drain that.
That's true, but we're not going to drain any reservoirs tonight, are we? We're going to fill the world with creativity. And when Dave approached me, he said, I'd like to talk to you about being a blind journalist at BBC. What can I ask you? And I said, you know what? You can ask me anything you like. So there's my challenge to you. And you got to bear in mind, right? So I'm a correspondent for BBC News. That doesn't mean, far from it, actually. It doesn't just mean you're a TV person. I like to hope that I have TV skills, but you're in everything. You're an online writer, particularly at an incident, live page updates, where you might go to the BBC News app and, there's a big event. For example, the collapse of the Baltimore Bridge, which I was actually reporting on from the United Kingdom. I've been over it myself when I was working out in the United States last year. And you got these live page updates. It might be that you're finding some words of copy for that. And then you might be sort of presenter's friend, the correspondent chatting on the news channel. I did a bit of that. Or, maybe, there's radio involved with that as well. And, who knows down the line. I'm a big advocate of getting on as many platforms as possible and showing people what it is I do. So, for instance, if you check out my LinkedIn video, I show people how I read scripts and stuff using a screen reader. And for me, I think, well, look, firstly, we're all interested, right? Because basically, we're learning something we don't already know. And then secondly, in this age of rage where nobody trusts anything at all, I kind of like to say, well, okay, here's what I do, here's how I do it and why I do it, and this is why you can trust us. That's my argument anyway.
How do you, when you write a script, I just put my phone down. Sorry, I've got some questions that people have asked me on
sure.
YouTube community tab, and I was just looking them up. But when you write a script, everybody always says to me, you must be so organized, me, not you. And I am like the least organized person in the world. Every time I get a comment on a YouTube channel saying, my wife reads through them as well. And sometimes she'll just be laughing. And like, what is it? And she said, somebody says, you must be so organized, so tidy. And I'm absolutely the opposite of that. I know where stuff is, but if anybody else, even like the file structure on my computer, I did a video for Brainblaze the other day, and I got ChatGPT to write something about Watergate.
Okay.
Which I was going to put in as ChatGPT having written it.
Oh, okay. So you were going to flag it in clearly to your audience, not just plagiarize it and own it as your own. Because that is something that we wouldn't do, by the way.
No, I wouldn't do that either. I do use ChatGPT to correct dictation errors, which is something it's actually quite good at. Because if you dictate a lot of text, which I do, you get the common mistakes there, and there, and your twos and things like that. So if you tell ChatGPT to, I just write, the following document was created using speech recognition software. Can you please correct any errors? And it'll just go through, and it does that much quicker
really
than you can do with spell check. But yeah, I didn't end up using it, but I did mention it in the script. And the reason I didn't use it is because it was just factually incorrect and really rambling. And I said, if anybody's interested, I'll stick it in the comments section. And so many people said, oh, where's the ChatGPT thing? Where's the ChatGPT thing? But my notes folder on my computer, there's like 400 unnamed documents. And it's in one of those somewhere.
Temp.docx probably. So I think what you're asking me is how do I go about writing scripts?
Yes.
And the answer to that is it depends what kind of a script, because just off the top of my head, the different types of script I might write. So you might do a TV package script. I'm going to come back to all of these. You might do radio scripts. And there's a difference between, say, for example, a radio package that might go out where you kind of stick together a 3-4 minute report that might go out on the Today program. For instance, we did one of Donald Trump's indictments in Washington, D.C. There's a different type of script if you are doing what they call radio bulletins. So if you're listening to the 1 o'clock radio news on Radio 4 or 6 o'clock or the 10 o'clock, then you'd write that differently. By the way, here's a little BBC factoid for you. If they say we want you to do something for the 6, they mean the 6 o'clock news on TV. If it's for 6 o'clock radio, they say, can you do us a piece for the 1800s? So there we go. There's a bit of BBC jargon there because everyone has its jargon. But they're all completely different styles. And you assume different knowledge based on different stories. And then the other type of script that I rather enjoyed doing when I was out in the States was a US legal explainer. And the other thing is, once you've done a script, it stays in my head. I think we had so many different US legal stories that I wanted to do almost a newsbeat style radio one explainer of complicated terms like grand jury and indictment and charge and what is a plea bargain. And many people might be thinking, well, isn't that patronising? It's not actually, because an indictment in the United States is different to what an indictment is in England and Wales, for instance. So what they all have in common is they're different ways of telling stories. So the logistics of how I read it is something I'm going to come back to, but just in terms of how you'd put together a story. As a blind person, I'm still very visual. So the very best experience I have working with my colleagues who are producers, because basically we're all journalists, we're all doing the same job. We just got a slightly different role within it. And whether our picture editors or whatever, we're all working towards the same thing. And I firmly believe, I'm not just being modest within that, we're all part of that great big collaboration. So I'd be thinking, right, so what is the story is the first most important thing. And then I want to understand what the pictures are that we have available, because that's actually really important for TV.
What, pictures?
So, pictures are the most important thing for TV. So what you want to know is what's the most impactful picture, and it's going to depend what the story is. I could give you some rather serious examples. In fact, I'll give you. I was thinking, but would they be too grim? No, I'll give you a serious example and a less serious example. So during an investigation, I did a 9-month investigation into systemic mental health failings in the Southwest that led to the killings of 3 pensioners in their 80s at the hand of a man called Alexander Lewis Ramwell. You can Google the story because we also did a long read, what they call a long article online. The start of it, I thought the most impactful thing, because he was arrested twice in the days before he'd actually killed people. And he was arrested the 3rd time before he was detained under the Mental Health Act. And all the, without pointing fingers, obviously, there are all sorts of multi-agency reviews into, could the police have held him longer? Strictly speaking, there are very, very complicated laws that would govern that. But I was thinking, well, bear in mind he's been arrested twice and mental health services, for whatever reason, haven't detained him under the Mental Health Act. And then in that case, and this is very, very rare, because if somebody has a mental health condition or severe and enduring mental illness, they're very unlikely to be a threat to them, to anybody else at all, right? So it's an extreme case. But Alexander Lewis Ramwell had a diagnosis, and he still does, of paranoid schizophrenia. And again, the majority of people, contrary to what you'd believe in the tabloids, are not dangerous in that scenario. But in this case, his jumbled thoughts was that he thought that he was on a mission to save a woman called Charlie, I believe, if I remember correctly. And the first pictures were the CCTV from the custody suite at Barnstaple Police Station. And he said, all right, you're free to go. And you're thinking, right, because that says what the story is. And I think the first line, you're talking 2019 now, was... this was the first time Alexander Lewis Ramwell was released from police custody. Okay, so you kind of encapsulating what the story is. What you don't want to do is be too literal with pictures. So you've got to be slightly aware of that. And you've got to think, I think, what your second best pictures are. This is my opinion. People do this differently. And if possible, you'd use that at the end of the piece. Lots of people have different views, but your working out, and this would have some commonality with radio packages, but the scripting would be different. You think, what are the elements? So what interviews have I got? So we had a case study. We had an 82-year-old man called John Ellis, and I'd gone and built up a relationship with him and his wife Maureen over a 9-month period. And I'd gone to Lithuania to interview a chap called Stasis Bolivius, who was the night manager at a hotel. Really nice man, who had been attacked, but fortunately neither of those two people killed by Alexander Lewis Ramwell, who was very unwell at the time. But as we followed that story through, actually there would be the script for the TV, and then there was what we had, the long read online piece, which was a bit more detailed. So for TV scripting, less is more. It's the economy of language. You need to use as few words as possible. Dave, we're gassing on a little bit here tonight, but for a TV script, you need as few words as possible. Do I really need that word? What does it contribute? Where possible, I think, and this is interesting as a blind person, sometimes you kind of need to not be too literal with the pictures. The second example I was going to give you is a lighter example, a bit light and shade. We did a film when I trained with my new guide dog, Sean the Shepherd, as I'm calling him. And when we were doing that, I said, as my opening line, this is a tale of two Seans, which, you might think is a fairly naff thing. And the pictures that matched, they were the dog's tail sort of moving out of shot. Dave, I'm going to let some more light into the magic. I'm going to ask you to metaphorically count for 10, because I'm just going to go and feel the lens of my camera, A, to make sure I'm looking down it, and B, to make sure that I left the autofocus room forward. So I'm coming back, if you can hear me, everybody. It's just a moment of doubting where I was looking towards the camera, and we're back. So, and at the end of that piece, you're kind of thinking, well, a picture of a dog is always going to work quite well. And I think the line was, because we were about qualifying and having an assessment, and we were going to be assessed on our work. And the line was the payoff, as you call it. Of course, we smashed it, and just in time for Christmas too. Sean Dilley and Sean Doggy, BBC News. So you're kind of thinking, what's going to happen? That's one type of scripting. For a raid, go on. Sorry.
Okay. The point, I think, was actually like how you physically create the scripts as a blind person.
Well, it was important. I know I went into granular detail there. The reason it's important is TV's completely different to the other examples, because you have to understand what the pictures are and then how you link them without being too literal. So, you don't want to say in Waterloo and then have a sign of Waterloo. So as a blind person, the picture's the most important thing to understand. How would I go about creating it in any sense, whether it's TV or anything else? You work out what the structure is. So you write the story in the same way as any other correspondent. So once you've got your script done, the way I execute that, I would say, the way I read that, unless it's for, something where you memorize the script, which sometimes I do, but not normally for quick turnaround news, that I have a screen reader in my ear. I have JAWS for Windows. Or, I'm not going to lie, that's the one I use. Others are available, but that's the one I use.
Other screen readers are available.
Just because it's what I'm used to. And I split it into, I don't know, roughly about 6-7 syllables. And I split the line, so mid-sentence, so that when I'm reading it back, I can literally be reading the script at the same time I'm pressing the buttons down. So I script in exactly the same way. I do think sometimes, but not always, let's be honest, we could all be better at scripting, I think. I think sometimes the fact that I can't see is quite good, because I have to say to people, right, please describe this picture to me. And then that way I can talk about, I don't know, 2.5 miles of lava oozing out of the volcano near the Grindavik fishing town, whatever it might be. But I would say, as a blind person, the only scripting that's different to anyone else is either when you're doing it for TV or a digital video treatment, or if you physically need to cover a picture in words, like you're writing about something that's happening, you're describing a scene. You really need to understand it in a way that sighted people, understandably, I don't blame anybody, by the way, you're going to take it for granted because you can just do it. Seeing's easy, you know what I mean, if you can do it.
What do you, this covers a question actually that somebody, hang on, let me find out who it was. I'll give them a shout out.
Dave's just thumbing through his phone. No, not that message. That's the wrong one. That one's not broadcastable. What I'm not doing is padding.
Sorry, I don't know how to say your name, person who commented on the YouTube thing, but basically the question is, how do you feel about the rise of AI, as it were, within blind technology?
Yeah, good question.
I'm gonna pick this one up quickly and run with it for a sec. Just because it links in with what you were saying about photos. For me, like the new features in Be My Eyes, and for those of you who don't know, Be My Eyes is an app. I believe it's now available for Android as well, but it started out only as an iPhone app. And you can use it to either call a volunteer who will assist you through the camera, so they'll tell you what's happening on the screen. People use it for, well, anything, but reading instructions is one. I've used it when I've been out and about for signposts and stuff like that. But fairly recently, they've added a feature to it where you can take a picture and send it to the app, and it will use AI to analyze it. And for me, it's been an absolute game changer, especially for script writing. I was doing one, again, I'm plugging Simon's stuff unbelievably on here. But
Simon Whistler, you mean from Brain Blaze?
Yeah, definitely.
If you're watching, Simon, I mean, I've never met you or spoken to you, but if you're watching, I'm happy to plug you as well. I sometimes, I don't take this the wrong way. Sometimes I stick your videos on when I'm off to bed, and it's not to send me to sleep. It's just one of those things I like learning. But yeah, you were saying, so you use it for writing for correcting the errors in some of these scripts, right?
Yeah, but for the picture recognition, I was doing a script the other day on declassified files. Now, a lot of the stuff that's been released is just image files, pictures of the documents that people have uploaded. So before AI photo recognition, I wouldn't have been able to do that because, well, I could have, but it would have been a huge pain to individually OCR everything and then correct it down into a readable format. But now you can just take a screenshot, send it to Be My Eyes, and it'll just read the text straight out of the picture.
Yeah, but I think, to be fair, one of the questions that people are asking as well, and it's a fair enough one, there are two sides to this argument. And you might be thinking, hang on a minute, you're being Mr. Impartial BBC journalist, just balancing. I'm not. I made a programme about this. So I made a programme for it. I did a few things for Radio 4. Did an interview with Justin Webb when I was in Washington, D.C. about... it was the Be My Eyes app because it uses open AI, uses an API, so like an architecture that taps into it. And I also did a chat for In Touch on Radio 4, the Today programme piece, which included a bit of a package where we'd gone into a bagel shop. Again, others are available, but it's called Call Your Mother because it was right on the corner of where we were. I was able to, just read the menu and say, I'd like something, whatever it was, let's just say something with humus in it. And you can ask it questions. But one of the ethical questions that came up quite a bit, actually, Dave, is what about other people's privacy? And the reason this came to a head was when I was out in the States working, I took a picture one day and I was inside the US Capitol building because I do still currently hold a pass as a member of the TV and radio gallery at Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. And it said, we cannot describe this photo for privacy reasons. And I thought, well, that's some kind of clever geofencing because I was in, Congress. So I thought, okay, that's weird. Later that day, I tried to take a picture in a public place and it said exactly the same thing. And that's when I got across, just by doing a bit of digging, that what's happening is because it's got people's faces in it, there's been an issue. I think there's a state, I want to say Illinois, but don't quote me on that absolutely, that has a particularly strong privacy rule. And of course, Open AI, which is essentially what Be My Eyes is, it kind of taps into that. It's experimental. From an individual perspective as a blind person, it's absolutely fabulous, but it opened up all sorts of ethical questions. So AI developers use this term called guardrails in terms of what it should and shouldn't be saying. So if I take a photo of myself now and say, do I look pretty? You've got to think, well, what is AI? It's what they call, I'm going to use semi-technical language, not very, but I'll explain. It's sort of an artificial intelligence language model. So what it does, it dips into the internet, picks words out and spits stuff out. But unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily discriminate very well. So I'm not saying OpenAI or Be My Eyes specifically, but it doesn't discriminate well, and it can dip into, say, for example, more malevolent details. So for example, it could say, no, you're really ugly, and that could be harmful, for example, to certain people. Or might it tell you to do something that would be a bad thing? Could some people be impressionable? And then one of the issues that we highlighted, OpenAI, which clearly does an awful lot of very innovative stuff, despite its name of OpenAI, which you might take the view, well, that means it's open source and everybody can see how it works. It's not. You don't know what the source coding is. Last time I was looking at it then. So to that degree, there's all sorts of questions. What's it collecting? Now, my understanding from the Be My Eyes and OpenAI research I did is that it's not storing that, and it doesn't collect biometric data. However, I was in the office one day in the bureau in DC and reporting on Donald Trump's Alabama speech. And when I took a photo of the monitor, it told me Donald Trump is making a speech at a podium with the logo of the Republican Party of Alabama. So, I mean, that was before all the privacy issue where it was blocking faces for a short time. So you think, well, hang on, is there a level of biometrics there? So what they ended up with was a situation where they won't, collect that information about individuals, but what they will do is they'll give you a very good description. But there's a big issue, I think, on inclusion here, is, for example, if artificial intelligence takes a photo, given how wrong AI has got stuff in the past and said stuff that's actually discriminatory without meaning to, and again, I'm not pointing OpenAI here, it was actually another company. If you take a photo and there's a person there, can it say a woman? Can it say a man? Because, of course, on an image, nobody knows how somebody would identify in terms of gender, sex and beyond. So there are ethical questions there. And then if we accept that, is it right or wrong? I'm blind and I can't see. Somebody who can see, even if you're going to be nuanced and certainly would try to be inclusive and think, okay, well, people can identify however they like, would be able to, see and have an idea of how someone appears. So how far do those guardrails go? What about the privacy concerns? And at the same time, what about the massive advances for people like you and me, Dave, who can't see?
It's interesting what you were saying there about the it giving a description rather than the name. I AI'd a picture the other day, which was someone had taken the pic. I can't remember who it was. One of the founding fathers. There's a thing that Jeffrey Epstein is a vampire,
right?
And he looks like, I can't remember. I wrote a whole thing on it. I can't remember. I'd have to Google it, and I'm using all my things at the moment. But anyway, I took a picture, and it's somebody's photoshopped the guy from who's on the $5 bill?
I don't know, but it's possibly Benjamin Franklin. I mean, I don't know at all.
Okay, let's say it's Franklin.
Yeah.
And they've highlighted the things on Jeffrey Epstein's face that look like, if it's Benjamin Franklin, then Benjamin Franklin.
Right.
But so I AI'd that picture, and it described that it had been doctored from the $5 bill. But it described the picture of Jeffrey Epstein as like a physical description of him. And then when I pointedly asked the app if the person was Jeffrey Epstein, it then said, yes, it looks like Jeffrey Epstein.
I think there's a difference between a high-profile person who's in the public domain and individuals, and I think that's one of the points that apps like Be My Eyes might make if they were here. What is interesting, though, I mean, you have made an interesting point. As AI gets better, one of the risks is that information can appear to be credible when it's not. And this is an area that my colleague Mariana Spring, the disinformation correspondent at the BBC, goes into quite a lot. And I know, for instance, Martin Lewis, the money-saving expert gentleman, and again, I'm just giving him as an example as an individual rather than the website he founded. There are sorts of people who claim to be Martin Lewis giving, consumer advice to buy cryptocurrency and stuff, and it's clearly not him. So the danger is, as it gets better and it's not there yet, how do we know who to trust? There was a video by Marcus Brownlee, the tech guy on YouTube. I spent a lot of time on YouTube. And he was referencing how you can get AI to generate videos now. Because I think about a year ago, there was an AI of Will Smith eating spaghetti. It's not the most outrageous thing he's done, obviously, after the Oscars, one might say. But, the point he was making is that even a year ago, although there was a picture of sort of Will Smith eating spaghetti, it was obviously not a real video. When you're saying, can you create me a drone shot of a beach on a sunny day with an ice cream van selling 99s with a flake at £1.29 or something, it becomes a bit of an ethical risk. But at the same time, what is interesting, because I was thinking, I thoroughly recommend, I'm not just here to plug the BBC, by the way, there's a really great thing if you Google called Anatomy of a Killing. And it was an investigation by BBC Africa Eye. And it was almost, to a degree, it's the original Don't F with Cats, the Netflix series. It uses open source investigations to track stuff down. One of the things the investigators, my colleagues, were working on was to try and identify a location by the background, the mountain line. And eventually they did that through thousands of pictures and comparing it. But one imagines that you could probably get AI to do that. In the series Don't F with Cats, there's a short spoiler, so I'm not going to tell you the end, but there's one bit from it. But cover your ears if you're the three people who haven't seen that yet.
I haven't seen it.
Well, there's a scene in there, it becomes relevant without telling you why, where there's someone they're trying to track down, and there are traffic lights in the background, and they can see, it might be a Shell petrol station. It doesn't really matter which petrol station, or BP or whatever it was. And
other fuel is available.
What they were indeed so, but whatever it was, it was important they tried to identify where this was. And somebody recognised from, this is Don't F with Cats, the Netflix series, that the traffic lights were from, I don't think it was Ontario, but it was somewhere in Canada. So what they were able to do, and these are the sorts of things we do as open source investigators as well, is they got a map of the city that the traffic lights came from, they thought. They looked at how many of those fuel gas stations there were, petrol stations there were, I think there were 2 of them. And they were able to use Google Earth to identify where that person was. And they traced them from a picture. We've done it. We've got a great guy at BBC, and I'd love to name him, but I have to tell you he's secret squirrel. And so I'm really not sure. I'm not sure he would thank me, but definitely better than, definitely more skilled at this than any intelligence person I've ever spoken to. He does all of these things. I'm not going to say. There was a really high profile story where the person was sort of trying to avoid the media. And there was a photo of them in Spain, I believe it was. All it was them. In the background, there was a beach and there was a billboard sign. And what this person did, I would love to tell you who he is, because he's a really good mate of mine and he's also one of the best investigators I've come across, but I'm sure he wouldn't thank me. What this person X did was cropped that photo, used a bit of the sign where there was writing and ran it through, I'm not even going to say what, but something that's very open source. And they were able to see about 30 other photos and it was apparent the location of the hotel. So secret squirrel.
There are some people online who are just insane at doing that. I mean, it's so easy to be doxxed now. I mean, I'm so careful.
Well, you do need to be careful, but the conclusion to that story, not to seize control of your YouTube interview was this: is Secret Squirrel, we're going to call him, phones up the hotel and asks for this big name person. They said, I'll put you through to his room, and then they hang up because they don't actually want to say, hey, we know where you are. But they were able to go and scrutinise this person for a very serious public interest matter. So danger is, of course, that if I would like to see ourselves as the good guys, to be honest with you, and but if the good guys can do it, then the bad guys can as well. That is the danger.
Yeah, you can argue that for anything, though.
Of course, I don't intend to, but I agree with you.
It is a problem, though. I mean,
I'll tell you this: if you are someone I am genuinely investigating, which I must, so I've done jobs in the past. I worked at Panorama for a couple of years, so that was my bread and butter every day. Once in a blue moon, I'll be involved in an investigation in my current role. There's a really big investigation I was involved in, particularly at the earliest stage, which and I can't even talk about it for legal reasons. But yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of things you can do. But the one thing I will tell you, despite, so you read an awful lot, particularly if you look on, say, for instance, X, formerly Twitter, you'll read an awful lot about, people hate the BBC or whatever. That, believe it or not, that really is not the majority of view. In fact, it's very much the minority view. What I find is if you phone up and say, hey, I'm calling from BBC News, people will more or less tell you anything. I mean, again, normally they would verify who you are, so please don't do that. But I've worked other organisations, and to a degree, some people would trust it, some people wouldn't. I would say the trust factor, that's so important to, what the BBC does, but it's also, it kind of arms you with that. And I don't think AI is ever going to quite replace that. I think back to an example, this was... I'll tell you exactly what this was. You'll like this. For anybody who's old enough to remember the whole Tony Blair, Peter Foster scandal and Cherie Blair. So there's a fellow called Peter Foster who, you can Google it. I'm not going to go into the case, but he was Australian. He was in Australia. He was of massive public interest. This was my first real dip into investigating or, trying something on this, how I got into it, I think. Everybody was after trying to get hold of Peter Foster, and I knew the hometown he was in. So I phoned International Director Inquiries. I can't remember what that was. I think the number might have been 153 actually, but whatever it was, or maybe it's 193.
It used to be 192.
Well, there was that, but there was an international one which was different, which I think was 153. But anyway, that's not the substantive point here. How many pubs have you got in? And I said wherever it was, because it was quite a small place. Can't even remember it. You are talking about 23, 24 years ago. We got 6. I said, can I grab the number of all of them, please? And I did. And I phoned up at a pub and I said, excuse me, is Peter Foster there at the moment? I said, who's calling? Oh, my name's Sean. And he said, what are you after? I said, well, I'll discuss that with him. And I was producing James Whale on TalkSport Radio at the time, actually, a long time ago. First pub I called. Yeah, it's Peter Foster. I was Peter. I said, I've been really cheeky. I said, don't hang up for a minute. He said, I promise you I'm going to make you want to talk to me. He said, you're a journalist? I said, yeah, sort of. I mean, I was a producer in radio at the time. I said, I've done something really clever finding you, right? Would you agree? He said, yeah. I said, look, how would you fancy helping us out with an exclusive chatting to James Whale? Because it's not the Sun or the Mirror or anything like that. But we'd love to speak to you, and you know James Whale. He said, you know what? Purely because you're a cheeky and then he used a different word, I'll do it. And he said that on the air. And so that was kind of almost my original open source investigation. And really the basic techniques, we use technology, but that's what journalism is. In fairness, there's a bit more to journalism than that. But it's about thinking out of the box. It's about thinking, I would have a good idea how to track someone down. Sometimes you want to find something out, you really have to think out of the box. Again, when I was at Sky, this is a story we decided not to do, by the way. We were doing a lot on Paris attacks, and I was working on that a lot, but from London, doing a bit of door knocking and stuff, tracking people down. I saw some photos from from the attack on the Bataclan. And it's about building trust, because sometimes people do want to talk to you, and it's not about hassling. I remember at the time, and you're going back... What would that be? 2015. Yeah, you'd be going sort of 2015 there or thereabouts. And I had this idea, because you think of different ways of telling stories. Because the weapon that was used, I believe it was an AK-47, which uses 7.62 ammunition.
Oh, you better be right on this.
People will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm fairly certain I'm not, actually.
You're going to get hit up in the comments about this.
No, and they'll say Davey was quite right. He's obviously knows his AK-47 is what they're saying. No, but in reality,
Don't call it an assault rifle. They'll come for you. They hate that.
I'm thinking about that. You probably could call an AK-47 an assault rifle, actually, but we could come back to that in a minute. It matters not because but I thought, right, it might be good to do an explainer. So how do you get hold of a fully automatic AK-47 in the UK where the laws on these things are very tight? Not that we'd want to. I wouldn't have, at the time. I was a reporter rather than a correspondent, unless I was doing politics at Sky. But you don't want a reporter or a correspondent shooting a gun, really. It would give the wrong look, particularly internationally, where we're very much neutral and non-violent. But I thought, right, okay, how do you go about getting hold of that? I need to be slightly mindful because I don't actually want to tell someone how they can get their hands on it. But there are things called private ranges where people have certain things called Section 5 licence authorities. But there's a really big shooting place in Surrey that's used, like, for example, 23 SAS, I believe. No, it's not. It is actually 21 SAS, but it's one of the territorial regiments of the Special Air Squadron, or the Special Air Services it officially is, and they have their own shooting range there. And I've spoken to somebody who used to be involved in that sort of line of things, and I said, what's the chance that we can feature this? And I got the agreement of doing it, and they said, well, there we go. So I went to the then head of Home News. I mean, they were massively impressed that I managed to get hold of that in the UK, but then we just kind of thought, yeah, but this would just look all wrong. But I would say that ultimately the skill is being able to think out of the box and call different people. I know you probably want to make progress on your questions, Dave, so I'm gonna be quiet now and let you speak.
Just one more thing about the AI, and then I'll move on. You were saying that it's always going to struggle with things like, like you did, tricking someone to talk to you over the phone. But if you look...
I didn't trick anybody to talk to me over the phone. No, I didn't. That's called blagging. I didn't trick anybody. I just phoned up and said, would you talk to me? I was quite honest about it, but go on.
You look at like AI voices now. I mean, I believe a certain Mr. Fry is engaged in some sort of dispute because somebody took all the words he used whilst recording the Harry Potter series and created a fairly convincing Stephen Fry voice. So
I mean, I know nothing about this individual case, but I've heard of similar where people have used, recordings to create voices. So I'm aware of the concept, if not that particular case.
So if you can make a good voice, there's no reason it's going to be easier to convince somebody that you're that person.
Yeah. So trust online is really, really very important. And, for those old enough to know this legal expression, Mandy Rice Davis, I would say this, wouldn't I? But that's what you're going to see from my colleagues an awful lot as we move forward. It's just not just here's the information, but here's how we found it out. Here's why it's important. And it's not about patronising people or whatever, but there's an awful lot of misinformation out there, and people trust the sources. They do. Younger people in particular, I'm 41, so I don't think I can call myself young anymore, but are very kind of promiscuous with news habits, so it'll be aggregated sites and they'll read anything. Whereas in the US, actually, people tend to have more brand loyalty, and it's a very different scenario. So, the point is, I would hope anyway, and I'm sure any media organisation would as well, but the fact is whether you watch traditional media or actually in reality you're on you're on TikTok, for example, and you see one of their 60-second explainers, that you begin to think, okay, well, this is a brand that I know and it's a brand that I trust, and this is how they've done it, and that's the theory behind it. But that's the challenge for everybody, isn't it? Right? Because there's a sea of misinformation that's out there online.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I mean, even doing the work that I do, you can find 5 or 6 different sources on the same thing with 5 or 6 different explanations.
But then you have to assess the source. So first, here's what we do as journalists, right? And you do the same anyway, as with anybody who's done university or anything like that. Everyone's got an axe to grind. So who is this person? What is it they're saying? Why might they be saying it? If they put their own version on it, how can you trust it? Is there anything to back it up? If you've got documentary evidence, is there more than one person saying it? So you've always got to look at people's motivations, and that's exactly the same when you're, doing something on Google or whatever. Dodgy Dave from Dagenham can stick up a page on why the Baltimore Bridge had collapsed,
I think it was
So
probably
good.
Trump's fault.
Well, but I mean, the point is, on a serious note, that's a really on point, issue really, because it's a really good point. You've got so many competing interests there. You've got supporters of, say, Joe Biden who might want to undermine Donald Trump. You've got supporters of Donald Trump who might want to make him, look particularly good. You've got potentially foreign interests who would have an interest, in whether Donald Trump wins or loses the election. So actually, you say it in jest, but it's a really, really interesting point. And never before has technology been as advanced. I would say the first online election was probably the 2010 election. I used to have it doesn't exist anymore, but I used to have a blog called lobbysean.com because I was in the lobby. Doesn't exist anymore, so unless you really have some
I bet
cash
it does.
well, it'll be cached somewhere, but it was the first election where anybody who's out there can kind of, at the time it was called Twitter, so I'm going to say they could tweet. That would be the correct word for the time.
It is still tweeting though, isn't it? I mean, they've changed.
In parlance, in general speak, I would think I'll tweet. I tend to not think I'm going to X, but that's just that's just a personal point.
Right, I've got a couple of quick fire questions for you.
Yeah, I'll give you short answers on these. You go for it.
We're rocking into nearly an hour and a quarter, so
all right, stay with us, everybody. I mean, obviously, I'm sure lots of people have liked this already.
I need the sweet watch time. Do you know how much? This is a quick aside. Do you know how many view hours you have to have before YouTube will consider giving you any money?
Yes, I did know this. Unless this has changed, you used to have 4,000 watch hours, 1,000 subscribers, and there's another metric I can't totally remember.
It's now 3,000. Sorry, anybody who's watching this, I'm freezing. I haven't got some sort of illness. I'm underground, and I'm using all the electricity I have in my batteries to power lights. But yeah, sorry, I'm shivering, Sean.
So how many hours is the question we all want to know?
It's 3,000 hours, which is, I suppose, isn't that bad. It's 3,000 hours over a year. Which I haven't
yes, it
yet.
did have to be within 12 months. Okay, so they've actually reduced that by 25%.
And it's 500 subscribers. But if you want to make any money, if you want to make any money from a short, you have to have. I think it's. I could look, but I won't. 3 million. Yeah, 3 million short views in a month.
I mean, and the thing about short views is they kind of rock up, and it's YouTube's own version of TikTok almost, isn't it? So I can imagine that. I think it's easier to rack up shorts than it is for somebody to proactively click on something. And an awful lot of people, they'll just very quickly, nope, yes. Particularly people who are younger than I am. Whereas, you got to bear in mind as well, this is true for all social media. There's ethics in what you're looking at. So your YouTube will look very different to mine because, like, I like the American show Porn Stars, PAWN. Porn Stars comes up a lot on mine because I quite like it, and Flipping Bangers, which is a UK series, and then I'll get an awful lot of US police incidents because of stuff I've searched for work. So you've got to be aware that the internet echoes back to you what you're looking at. So sometimes if you want to have a look into the deepest, darkest crevice of your mind, all you have to do is have a look at your YouTube, to be frank.
My YouTube watch recommendations are weird because I've got a few
because you're
YouTube
weird.
Accounts.
No,
there is that.
No.
I've got a few YouTube accounts, but my wife and I share the YouTube Premium subscription. So I use it a lot for research for work. And
I didn't like the intonation on the word research there.
I have in the past been accused of just watching YouTube and not working.
Well, when your job's YouTube, but no, I mean I consume a load of YouTube because it's important to be as diverse as possible. And anyway, it means that you get different ideas and production techniques. But anyway, look, I'm interrupting your quick-fire questions, so you challenge me, try and catch me out. Do your worst.
Okay, well, these are from people who posted. I put a call out on my channel for people to ask you questions. I was going to say people's names, but the screen reader is weird about reading stuff that doesn't have spaces in it. So
right, yeah.
You'll know who you are if you're watching. Were you born blind?
Me? No. Well, I was born with congenital blindness. In other words, quite a lot, a significant visual impairment. So if you look at my medical record, my summary care record, it would tell you 1982 congenital blindness. It said less than 360 or 660? Basically unmeasurable in the left eye. And it was basically 15% acuity in the right eye, but it was very limited field. And I'd lost all of what pretty much remained by the time I was 14. So it was really quite sudden that I actually went blind in that sense.
Okay, I shall answer the same question. I've got something called optic atrophy, which is, in my case, where the optic nerves didn't develop properly before I was born. So I have had what they call no usable vision, which isn't quite true. I can see light and dark, light perception I have.
Is that is that hand movements only? Would they describe that as, or?
I can't see hand. If I put my own hand up, I can see it. Or if it depends on the room lighting as well. But I tend to go with no usable vision.
So I have loads of conditions. I have cortical vision impairment, but separately I have, in terms of my eyes, in addition to the primary cause that. So I have nystagmus. By the way, the correct pronunciation is nystagmus, but it's my condition, so I'm going to call it nystagmus. I've got issues, I think, with the shape and size of the eyes. I still have... Actually, I don't know if I do. So I had an exotropic strabismus, i.e. one eye stuck out to the left, all the way to the left. I'm not sure if it still does. And a couple of other conditions. But recently-ish, so in November, just before I went training with my guide dog, I walked into a tree branch. When I say a tree branch, I mean a thick one. So I have knocked out the lens, and it's a blind eye, so it doesn't matter. Other than it does sometimes hurt a little bit. If it's too much, I'll get it checked out. But so if a really bright light's shone on it, apparently it kind of reflects in a weird way, and the pupils are slightly weird shape. But I guess it's quite luxury, isn't it, to bash into, well, not knocking into a tree, but knocking the lens of your eye out and thinking, I'm not going to bother getting that sorted.
Yeah, it's not like you need it.
I'm not using it. If I can dig it out, and you can have it if you want it.
Yeah, yeah, it's always good to have a spare. My parents actually had real trouble getting my blindness certified, as it were. They knew I couldn't see because I used to walk around. I was just about to put my hands up. If I do that, it makes my camera put flashing lights up and stuff. That's a weird thing, which I'll explain in another video because it's not really relevant to this. But yeah, they. I think I was 2.5 before they managed to get me registered as blind.
Yeah, but Dave, that's fair enough, man. And the reason it is that you can't really tell, particularly when children are young. So my vision impairment was picked, other than the fact my eyes were wobbly, and one always pointed out. Apparently that wasn't enough for my mum to think, I better get that checked. No, bless her. But the doctor came round, and we were staying in Wales with my grandmother, I think. And the GP came round, and I walked into a table. So I wouldn't have regarded, because I didn't know what normal would be, or typical, if you like, what my vision would be. But the doctor said, oh, look, I'd get his eyes checked out. So it wasn't until I was a toddler that process started. So that makes sense. And then also when children are younger, it's harder.
They kept taking me to the doctors, and one doctor basically told my mum that parents expect too much from their kids now, and
yeah, when will you learn to see, for pity's sake?
So yeah, that wasn't ideal. The other question we had was, how does having a guide dog improve your job? Make it easier for you to do your job?
I walk into fewer things. Yeah, I mean, working with a white sticker or long cane, because a dog's not for everybody. I say it's like having a really long arm, and you have to physically touch your environment. With a cane, I personally find your mileage may vary. I work in central London, don't forget, and I was living for like 3.5 months in the States, in big cities, but certainly in the UK, much more. People grab you more when you've got a cane. It's really weird. And bear in mind, I have been robbed. I really don't like that. With a dog, you're still working. But, you know, who knows? I'd say it's like 15% of the effort to work with a dog. When you're working, you don't have to keep grabbing colleagues' arms and, you know, thinking about too much of this stuff. So in that sense, I mean, how do I put this? I just don't have to think about things I otherwise would have to.
Fair enough. Very succinct. I think that's all for the questions.
You make it sound like it's an interview under Police and Criminal Evidence Act caution, you know. You don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you not mention the questions. But yeah, so I mean, what I would say, Dave, is for me personally, I never mind answering questions. You can approach us on Twitter. Or X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, which is at Sean Dilley News. You'll find me. That's not just a plug, because to be honest with you, I use X less than I did, simply because the change in verification means that I used to find it more of a useful tool personally to be sure that I don't know if there's a blue tick mark that says something's from I don't know. I'll make somebody up now. Well, I won't make him up. He exists. Like Elvis Costello, for example, probably still has one. You'd be fairly certain they were verified in that sense. So I still like it to a degree, but then you also have to bear in mind it's an echo chamber, and sometimes all social media platforms can be a cesspit, because once upon a time people might see somebody like me on the TV. In fact, to be fair, you probably wouldn't see somebody like me on the TV, because there aren't exactly an awful lot of blind people who work on the TV. A couple of us.
They're all piano tuners.
And that, you know, and indeed that would be the cliche, and they would say, don't like that bloke very much or whatever. Whereas now you can get your phone out and approach people personally, and, you know, for example, when I was in the States, had an awful lot. I have had this in the UK, where people, why do your eyes point in different directions? Why would you ask that? Why would you ask that? But if it's a genuine inquiry, then I'm always happy. I'm less friendly to. I posted an issue with a private hire driver recently, because in my private life, not when I'm working, I have an action camera mounted to my chest. So in the first place, they say he's blind but he knows exactly where to point the camera, and then so that's not a real dog anyway. They said actually it's a dog for the partially sighted. Who goes around with a
fake dog?
I mean, that does happen, particularly in America. And it's been known, but they said that's not a real guide dog. That's a guide dog for the partially sighted, quote unquote. Other than the fact, actually, if someone's got a guide dog, it's a guide dog. Someone's level of vision doesn't mean it's not a guide dog, by the way. And they said he wasn't wearing a harness, but like he physically was. I mean, I had somebody check the video. It's just kind of, sometimes people think they can be quite vile. I remember, and you've got to kind of expect it. I remember posting about a supermarket access refusal because I had two from the same branch, not the same branch, same supermarket, different branches in central London. And a fella who's got a disabled account now, but used the name Barty the Shark, kept posting ironically inaccessible pictures, but obviously it was described to me, of like a credit card, debit card looking thing saying victim card. And so you kind of got to have a thick skin and think, yeah, all right, you know, you're going to say something nasty, so, you know, have at it, do what you want. But in the meantime, you just need to not take it too seriously. But you have got to listen to genuine feedback and criticism, I would suggest.
I've always had dogs ever since, well, like growing up. I've never had a guide dog, but often when I'm out with the dogs, people will say to me, "Oh, is that a blind dog?" I'm like, no, the dog can see perfectly.
Yeah,
giving blind dogs to blind people.
I know. It's
giving blind dogs to blind people is mean.
Yeah. Have you ever considered working with a guide dog? Because I say it's not for everybody.
I have. I don't travel enough, I think. I mean,
yeah, that's one of the eligibility criteria, not just in the UK but around the world.
I live.
You have to travel quite a bit.
Yeah, I live 3 minutes walk from my office, like,
Right.
and I could
Fair
probably
enough.
I could walk here without a long cane,
I mean, I
don't,
wouldn't do that
but I
because you'd
could.
walk into somebody, Dave. I'm going to advise you not to do that. And if people don't know you're blind, I used to go when I did guide running, or I'm being guided and I don't have a cane, and I've walked into somebody because I'm being guided. People can be quite nasty. Not on the whole, people are brilliant. But look, I don't know if I've answered all your questions or whether you had anything else that you personally wanted to do. But I would say this: working in my industry as a blind person is, it's not that usual. There are colleagues of mine, Gary O'Donoghue. Gary O'Donoghue's in DC Bureau, senior North America correspondent. You've got Ian Hamilton in, Scotland, for example, at Pacific Key. So I would say that access technology and media is available for lots of things. If at some point you check out my LinkedIn, I'm planning to post how I got the camera set up in the house on my own to film this YouTube. But
send me when you put it up, send me a link and I'll put it in the description.
Yeah, absolutely. You do that. You're welcome. You don't feel obliged, but you're very welcome to append it to the end of this video if you like.
Of course I will.
But what I would say to you is that it's a tremendously challenging environment working in my industry, being blind, and I imagine with any significant visual impairment. I think I'm very proud to work for the BBC. Generally, actually, it's the gold standard of journalism. In reality, like anything else, particularly when you do the online videos or TV, it's a very visual medium. So I won't lie to people and say that the challenges aren't going to be harder than somebody who is fully sighted. What I will say, there's an awful lot out there that's available, and I will give a plug. I'm going to do this. Give a plug to check out the BBC Careers website, particularly if you're blind or disabled and you might think, well, actually, I couldn't work in the industry. You can, because I do. You might think, I wouldn't have the belonging. But I'd have a look at that. I'd have a look at BBC Extend, where there are jobs that are very specifically targeted towards disabled people. You still have to, have the skill set. Nobody's going to give you a job because you have a disability in any sphere in this world. But
not a busy work job, no?
Certainly. Well, look, I'm quite proud of Extend, though, because it's really reaching out. The BBC is striving to achieve a workforce of 12% disabled people across the organisation as a whole. And indeed, actually, I'm quite proud of this. Actually, this is you're going to think, okay, you're just being new age, but this is true. BBC has more women working for it than men, so it's actually a female prominent organisation, and I think that you get better decision making where you have more diversity in every sense. So, and diversity, by the way, for anybody who's watching, doesn't exclude anybody. It literally means everybody. So when they say, "Oh yeah, you're after diversity," that doesn't include. It does. It includes you. They have a duty, the BBC, and that's why I'm proud to do the job I do, of universality and to, be reflective of society as a whole, particularly given the way that it's funded organisationally at the moment. And I'm sure the future is going to be very interesting with that. But whenever I'm out on a story, I'm Sean. I'm not. It doesn't matter that I'm blind. I'm Sean, the guy who's asking the questions who I think, would ask the questions that you would want to ask. And it's really important to me that on any, I'm going to use, it's going to sound like jargon, on any matter of political or industrial controversy, right, that you don't know what I think, you're going to have no idea how I would or wouldn't vote, whether I do or don't like any political party, perspective or opinion. We're not impartial on things like racism and criminality. So, you wouldn't expect to tune in and say, well, there have been 3 robberies today and it's a very distressing thing. But on the other hand, the robbers might enjoy the experience. So that's to misunderstand what due impartiality is.
Someone's making money,
Yeah, well, but,
well done,
people, it's quite interesting. I hear people, one of the things I hear an awful lot is, BBC, they have to always put, both sides of an argument. Well, you show me an argument that's only got 2 sides and I'll tell you that's a rarity. But I'll say, being blind and working in the job that I work in, it gives you a perspective that's different to the vast majority of my colleagues who have different life experiences and will bring something new to the table. And I am proud to say this, and I do mean this. I am myself, whether I'm at work or, the BBC. And I tell you what, I'm going to say this. Nobody going to that organisation should ever want to model yourself on whatever a BBC person is. And those were the great advice from a very dear person called Katie Lloyd, who's no longer at the BBC. She moved on. Was our former development director, but my goodness, is she missed in our organisation with her huge, wonderful heart. Inclusion of absolutely everybody under the sun, and just contributed so much to the culture within the organisation, and that that legacy continues. And actually, this is me being cheeky. That's not me even plugging the BBC. That's not. I'm telling you, that woman and her colleagues, Sarah Lamley and Ian George, I owe so much to those three individuals in particular for being where I am today. So, in reality, I don't think I'd be there if it wasn't for them. So I'm just going to say a massive thank you to them, and hopefully the more traditional lines of applying for jobs are going to be something that people are going to look at the careers website. You're going to check out BBC Extend, and you're going to know that yes, you can. Yes, you can. If I can, you can. Check it out. That sounded too much like, was it the everyday dad, isn't it? The fella in America. If I can figure it out, you can figure it out. I do watch a lot of YouTube.
Right. It's nearly time to wrap this up, but I promised I'd tell this story. So I have to now. And I can put it in as a teaser at the beginning to make sure people stay to the end. So,
well, it depends how good it is, Dave. If it's rubbish, then don't.
Well, roughly the story anyway. But
okay.
Back in the school summer holidays of last year, I suffered an injury, a power tool related injury.
Oh my goodness!
And
I'm cringing.
I mentioned it in several scripts, and people have been on at me to say what happened. So I should do that now. I haven't got pictures of the incident, but I shall send to Julian the pictures of my hand, and he can decide whether it'll get me demonetized. Ever since I was a kid, my dad and my mum as well, my parents, I was very fortunate to grow up in an area where just outside my house there's a massive field. So I learned to ride a bike and climb trees, and I've got 4 brothers. And my parents were very much of the opinion that, just get on and do it. There's no reason why you can't do whatever. So my dad taught me to use power tools and stuff when I was growing up. And
yeah, of course you would teach your blind son to do that.
Of course, And so I've always had always been interested in making things. And when I got my own house, I was fortunate enough to have a workshop space, and so we wanted a deck in the back garden, and we got people out to quote for it, and it was thousands of pounds, and we wanted to use reclaimed pallets. So we looked up to see how much it would be to buy just the pallets, and it was you can pick up in reasonable condition pallets for £4 or £5 a piece. So I'm not paying thousands of pounds for someone to come out and do that. I'll do it. So I went on Facebook Marketplace and I bought myself a table saw, and took the pallets apart and built a deck, and it worked for a few years and it was fine. Nice. We got rid of it in the end because we built a play area for the little one. But last year I decided I was going to make a puzzle box for my wife, my son and I. And so I'm making this little box, and I had to do quite an intricate cut on the table saw. And I'd realised a few cuts before that the blade was going blunt on the saw. So I was like, I must change that. And of course I didn't. And I thought, right, I'll just do this last one. I had the blade in a packet. I'll just do this last cut and then I'll change the blade. So I was cutting away and the blade hit a knot in the wood, which kicked the piece of wood I was holding kicked it up, and it pulled my thumb on my left hand and the 2 fingers next to it into the blade.
Oh, Dave. I mean, I've heard this story and it's making me cringe.
I cut the top off my thumb, and the
talk about a digital strategy.
Indeed. So yeah, and ended up in the hospital with that. Slowed my writing down considerably.
Right.
But,
you do lots of writing. Oh, you mean as in physically typing?
Physically typing, yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think I've done the story justice really, but I promised I'd explain what happened, and now I have.
Yeah. I mean, it's. I bought a chainsaw once, largely because I was told by my dad, actually, no, you can't do that. That would be dangerous. And I wasn't 12. I was like 38 or something. Because I lopped down the trees by it's petrol one. Putting the chain right near there, starting up, chopping one thing and then turning it off, which in the circumstances was the safest way to do it. I did do all the work. I didn't injure myself, but I thought, I'm going to kill myself with this, so I gave it to the old man. That's what. Not. I mean, he can see fine. By the way, I mean, just for the record, it wasn't somebody could kill themselves. Have this. Merry Christmas. But I don't know, Dave. I don't know. I'm not sure if this is going to be the teaser that's going to really get people hooked. Unless you say something like, maybe we could do this right now, as in a live thing. And I'll tell you how I chopped the end of my finger off. If you really do want to get demonetized.
Well, like I said, I've got pictures that my wife took in the hospital. I tell you what was good. She was at work at the time, and so I went round to my next door neighbour's house. She's a lovely old lady, and I knocked on the door. I said, "Will you give me a lift to the hospital, please?" And she was like, straight away. So yeah, no problem. And I didn't realise at the time that. When I did it, I came in from the workshop and I was washing my hand under the tap and trying to assess the damage.
Yeah.
But I'd wiped blood all over my face.
Right.
So, like, not on purpose, obviously, but so when I went next door, knocked on the door, my next door neighbour, she's opened the door and obviously my face is covered in blood. She didn't even realise like what I'd done to my hand until till later.
Oh, bless her. I mean, I'm not that squeamish about blood. Either when I've come across it in real life, like as I say, when I slashed my chin's catching the robber. We didn't even talk about this. I was probably not even sure how interested people would be, but in the last year, I've been on a couple of training courses. One of them was public order course. So I was petrol bombed a number of times.
Nice.
I can't talk too much about it because some of it's police tactics and you agree not to do that, but I was petrol bombed a number of times wearing all the kit. And the other one's something called hostile environment and first aid training, which any journalist who might, for example, want to go and work overseas, I did in DC, needs to do. So I'm an emergency trauma first aider. I'm not sure you'd want me to try it out on you, but I do walk around with a tourniquet in my bag. And I can tell you from a blind perspective, it's really interesting, particularly during some of the training that they do. It's not real blood, but apparently it looks identical to it as well. You know, I've come across it in real life, but it's kind of interesting from a blind perspective because when you do, anybody who's done so even workplace first aid, you do kind of a level that's slightly higher than that. It's kind of it's battlefield first aid, but it's the bit that short of you wouldn't inject everybody, so it's probably like level 1 battlefield or something. But anyway, I was quite good at doing the secondary, well, primary and secondary. Primary, you know, obviously in terms of whether someone's breathing and so forth and airway. And the type of first aid training that I do as opposed to what you might have for workplace. Because you're only really doing it if your colleagues are in really serious danger. You focus on whether someone's got a catastrophic bleed. So you talk an awful lot about it. I shan't, but, you know, we learn an awful lot about it. And applying those tourniquets and all of that sort of stuff. But the fake blood, it comes pouring out all over the place. And I think from a blind perspective, you're really quite good at feeling around in a way. Now, of course, obviously people can see things that we won't pick up on. But all of the trainers, they were saying, actually, I was doing really good secondary surveys. That's the bit where you're actually checking the whole body for puncture wounds, stab wounds, bomb blasts, all the stuff that you would do. I have done first aid in anger, but before I actually did all that training, I feel very much more equipped. But I can tell you, firstly, that was interesting. So blood doesn't do an awful lot to worry me, even the real stuff. But my 5-week training with my guide dog was definitely more intense than both those courses together. I think on that bombshell, actually, Dave, we've probably sent lots of people, hopefully to the BBC Careers website and Simon Whistler's YouTube channel, I'm sure you would say. But in the meantime, probably on their jolly way to bed. But can I just say thank you for having me? It's been a total pleasure.
Yeah, not a problem at all. Well, if it's popular, I'll have you back.
Yeah, I mean, and if you do any more injuries, do give it to us in stomach churning detail, won't you? I think it's an excellent teaser.
You were saying that blood didn't bother you, but
blood doesn't bother me. Blood doesn't bother me, but I'm aware that it's not all about me.
Well, it's when the first time I realised that it was quite a serious injury was that when I was walking up from the workshop to my house, my foot was getting wet.
Oh. I mean, if I did that to my finger, my foot might be getting wet, blood or no blood, I have to tell you. But I think that really is going too far. Hey, but listen, again, it's been a total pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. Thanks for listening. And I'll probably be coming to a digital screen or a TV screen or a radio near you very soon. Yeah,
you often wake me up in the morning, actually. Because I have...
I think you need to clarify that one. I mean, not in person.
Well, it's almost in person.
Wake up.
I have... the BBC is on my Alexa... What's it called? Flash briefing.
App in the morning. Would you like me to do a news voice thing for you? What can I say? So, like a news voice, what am I saying? Okay, I think of a bit of the script I did for the online, but I'll do it in more.
I'll tell you what you can say. I'll tell you what you can say in your news voice. Something along the lines of, if you made it to the end, please do like, comment, and subscribe.
That would probably breach a rule, but I think you've achieved your aim in you saying that. But what I can do is give you a bit of a line from a script I did on US Legal Lowdown, which was this. I mean, I'm going to do it more radio delivery for you, but the US legal system is full of complex legal terms, but worry not, we've got you covered with the handy Legal Lowdown. All criminal cases start with a prosecutor. They can work for a city, a county, a state, or even the US government, where they're sometimes known as a special prosecutor. I could go on all day. Once I remember a script, that's from last August, that's in my head.
Yeah, I remember you practicing that one.
I was remembering, so if I'm learning a script, it kind of helps. It's kind of like, if you can keep your head when all about are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you literally just have to remember, I can do the whole lot, by the way, but I think if I did that, I would be a plum, my friend.
I'm the exact opposite. I was talking to somebody the other day and they said, you'll have to come and join my pub quiz team because you've written about so many different things. You must, and I don't. Once I've written it, it's gone. Like,
I remember everything, but what I will say, out of interest, the microphone I'm recording on now is the one I tend to use. Not always, if you're in a TV edit suite or radio, but like if I'm in the field or at home, I've recorded TV packages from exactly where I'm sitting, where I'm doing, again, this is a tale of two Seans. I'm trying to think of some actual lines. Like, for now, it's all about getting to know each other. And it's once you've got the script there. But what I like about it is I'm in a really echoey room, and the particular microphone I'm using, which I won't plug a particular brand, it's actually one they use in Hollywood a lot, and we use it in news an awful lot as a TV microphone, and where you can have it 2 meters away from you and it'll hear you brilliantly. But what I've got is it's an inch or so from my mouth, and it's going through a mixing desk, and it sounds glorious. So I could probably say you've been listening to Dave Page and Sean Dilley on Dave Page's YouTube channel, apparently. A man of many names. It's his. Is it nom de guerre, which was your name of war, or a nom de plume, or is it just an alias? What would the police know you as?
I'm not going to comment or speculate on that. And on that note,
If you've seen this man,
this
call police
evening.
on 101 with reference number. Listen, thank you for having me. It's been a total pleasure. And
Thank you for coming.
We'll catch you soon.
Thank you. For anybody who did make it to the end, please do like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And just as a quick teaser for the next video, I'm going to be doing one of those finish the Google search videos. And they seem to be very popular at the moment, so I thought I'd give it a go. And so I'm going to type into Google, how do blind people? And then each letter of the alphabet and answer the first question that comes up in Google. So if that sounds interesting, please watch. For now, thanks and good night.